The email from my father sat unopened in my inbox for 3 days. After 15 years of silence, seeing his name there made my hands shake every time I checked my messages. I knew exactly what it would say. They needed money again. They always did. My name is Quinn, and I'm the daughter my parents pretend doesn't exist. 15 years ago, I made the unforgivable choice of marrying for love instead of money. Now I run a successful tech company, but to them, I'm just another nameless benefactor sending anonymous wire transfers when their accounts run dry. You need to stop torturing yourself, my husband Lance said, wrapping his arms around me as I stared at the laptop screen. Either delete it or read it. This in-between thing isn't healthy. I leaned back against his chest, drawing strength from his steady presence. I know, what if they've finally realized how wrong they were? What if they want to apologize? Lance kissed the top of my head. Then they can do it in person, not hide behind an email. The memory of that final confrontation with my parents still burns fresh in my mind. I was 19, young and naive enough to think love could conquer all. When I told them I was going to marry Lance, an artist with more talent than money, my father's face turned an alarming shade of purple. "You'll be cut off without a penny," he had roared. "Is that what you want? To struggle and scrape by with some penniless dreamer?" "Lance makes me happy," I'd replied, standing my ground even as tears streamed down my face. "Why isn't that enough for you?" "Happy doesn't pay bills," my mother chimed in, her voice dripping with disdain. "We raised you better than this, Quinn." "No," I shot back. "You raised me to believe money matters more than people. Well, I choose people. I choose love." "Then you choose to no longer be our daughter," my father declared, his words falling like a guillotine blade. I left that night with nothing but a backpack of clothes and Lance's hand in mine. We built our life from scratch. Small apartments, secondhand furniture, endless cups of ramen noodles. But we were happy. 5 years later, when my tech startup took off, I learned through old family friends that my parents had fallen on hard times. Without telling Lance, I started sending them money through anonymous wire transfers. Just enough to keep them afloat. Never enough to make them comfortable. Now, staring at that unopened email, I finally clicked it open. "To whom it may concern, I know you've been helping us financially over the years. We've never asked who you are or why. But we're desperate now. The medical bills are piling up, and we don't know where else to turn. If you could find it in your heart to increase your assistance, we would be eternally grateful. Regards, Richard." My father, the proud man who once commanded boardrooms, reduced to begging strangers for help. Part of me wanted to laugh at the irony. Instead, I felt tears sliding down my cheeks. "What does it say?" Lance asked softly. I showed him the email, watching his expression darken as he read. "The timing couldn't be worse," he said finally. He was right. Last week's medical tests had confirmed what we'd feared. Lance's mysterious symptoms weren't just stress or overwork. The treatment he needed would drain our savings, and then some. "I can't keep supporting them," I whispered, the reality of our situation sinking in. "Not with your medical bills coming up." Lance squeezed my shoulder. "Maybe it's time they learned who their mysterious benefactor really is." I sat up straighter, an idea taking shape. "Maybe it is, but not just yet." I opened a new email draft. "First, let's see if they can learn the lesson they tried so hard to teach me. That money isn't everything." "Quinn," Lance warned, "revenge isn't your style." "Not revenge," I corrected him, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Justice, with a side of karma." I began typing. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Smith, I received your request for additional assistance. Before I consider it, I have a question. What's more valuable, love or money? Your answer will determine my response." My finger hovered over the send button. After 15 years of silence, it was time to make my parents face the consequences of their choices. But this time, I would be the one setting the terms. I hit send. "You did what?" Mia nearly choked on her coffee, her eyes wide with disbelief. We were sitting in our usual corner of the local cafe, where we met every Saturday morning to catch up. "I sent them an email," I repeated, stirring my untouched latte. "Asked them to define what's more valuable between love and money. And they responded?" I pulled out my phone and read their reply aloud. Both love and money are essential for a comfortable life. One cannot exist properly without the other. Can you believe it? They're still trying to justify their choices. Mia leaned back in her chair, studying me carefully. Quinn, honey, what exactly are you hoping to achieve here? I want them to realize what they threw away, I said, my voice cracking slightly. All those years of choosing status over their own daughter. A memory flashed through my mind, my 16th birthday, when my mother presented me with a spreadsheet of eligible bachelors from good families instead of a cake. I'd laughed it off then, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. Your coffee's getting cold, Mia pointed out gently. Just like your revenge, if you ask me. It's not revenge, I insisted, but the words felt hollow even to me. I just want them to understand. My phone buzzed with a text from Lance. Doctor called. Need to move up next week's appointment. Can you come home? My hands started trembling. Mia noticed immediately and reached across the table. What is it? Lance's appointment got moved up. That can't be good, right? They only move things up when... Stop, Mia cut me off firmly. Don't go there. You need to focus on what's important right now, and I'm sorry, but playing mind games with your parents isn't it? I stood up, gathering my things. You don't understand. This isn't a game. This is you trying to heal a 15-year-old wound while your husband needs you, Mia interrupted, her voice gentle but firm. Quinn, you're one of the strongest people I know, but you can't fight every battle at once. Back home, I found Lance in his studio, absent-mindedly mixing colors on his palette. He hadn't touched a canvas in weeks, but the motions seemed to calm him. His hands were shakier than usual. Hey, I said softly, wrapping my arms around him from behind. What did the doctor say? They want to do more tests, he replied, setting down his palette. The numbers from last time weren't what they hoped for. I swallowed hard. How much will the new tests cost? Lance turned to face me, his expression serious. Quinn, we need to talk about the money you've been sending your parents. I already decided to stop. That's not what I mean, he interrupted. I've been thinking about what you're doing with these emails. Are you sure this is about teaching them a lesson and not about punishing them? Before I could answer, my phone chimed with another email from my father. Dear benefactor, your question about love and money has sparked much discussion in our household. Perhaps we were too hasty in our previous response. While money provides security, we've learned through hardship that it's a cold comfort when you're alone. We've made mistakes in our lives that no amount of money can fix. Regards, Richard. I showed the email to Lance, my hands shaking. See? It's working. They're starting to question their choices. Lance took my phone gently and set it aside. But at what cost to you? Every time you get one of these emails, I watch you relive that pain all over again. I need to see this through, I insisted. I need them to understand what they did to us. Us? Lance raised an eyebrow. Quinn, they didn't do anything to us. We've built an amazing life together. Their loss, not ours. Before I could respond, Lance suddenly gripped the edge of his workbench, his face going pale. I rushed to steady him as his legs buckled. I'm fine. He tried to wave me off, but his voice was weak. Just got dizzy for a second. As I helped him to the couch, my phone chimed again with another email from my parents. I ignored it, focusing on getting Lance comfortable and calling his doctor. While I waited on hold, watching Lance drift into an uneasy sleep, I realized Mia was right. I was fighting the wrong battle. My parents' approval or understanding didn't matter nearly as much as the man who'd stood by me through everything. But just as I was about to delete the email chain, Lance stirred and caught my hand. Don't, he whispered. You deserve closure. Just promise me you won't lose yourself in this. I squeezed his hand, tears threatening to fall. I promise, but right now, you're my priority. The doctor's receptionist finally came on the line, scheduling an urgent appointment for the next morning. As I hung up, I couldn't shake the feeling that my carefully planned revenge was about to take a back seat to something far more important and far more terrifying. The hospital waiting room felt colder than usual as I stared at my laptop, trying to focus on work emails instead of the battery of tests Lance was undergoing down the hall. My phone buzzed, another message from my parents. I ignored it. "You look like you could use this." Ricky, my business partner, appeared with 2 cups of coffee. He'd insisted on coming to the hospital when I mentioned I'd be working remotely today. "Thanks," I said, accepting the cup. "Any word from the investors?" "They can wait," he replied, settling into the chair next to me. "How's Lance doing?" I closed my laptop. "They're running more tests. The doctor mentioned something about experimental treatments, but the costs?" I trailed off, my throat tightening. "Quinn, you know the company can help with—" "No," I cut him off. "We agreed to keep business and personal separate. Besides, I've been saving for emergencies." Ricky's expression shifted. "You mean the money you've been sending your parents?" I shot him a sharp look. "How did you—" "I'm your CFO," he reminded me gently. "Those wire transfers weren't exactly subtle." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from my mother. "Dear benefactor, we haven't heard back from you. Please, we're desperate." "Enough," I muttered, opening my email. I began typing. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Smith, I've been following your situation closely for years. Your recent financial struggles seem to mirror the hardships you once forced upon someone else, someone you claimed to love. Perhaps it's time to reflect on how your past choices have led to your present circumstances. Regards, a concerned observer." "Whoa," Ricky said, reading over my shoulder. "That's pointed." "It's nothing compared to what they deserve," I replied, hitting send. "They threw me out with nothing but the clothes on my back because I chose love over money. Now they're learning what that feels like." "Mrs. Gomez?" a nurse called out. I jumped to my feet. "Your husband is asking for you." Lance was sitting up in bed when I entered his room, looking pale but alert. "Hey, beautiful," he managed a weak smile. "How are you feeling?" I perched on the edge of his bed, taking his hand. "Like I just ran a marathon," he joked, then turned serious. "The doctor wants to try a new treatment. It's promising, but expensive," I finished. "How much?" When he told me the figure, my heart sank. It was almost exactly the amount I'd been setting aside for my parents over the years. "We'll figure it out," I said firmly, squeezing his hand. "I'll talk to the insurance company, maybe get a second mortgage on the house." "Or," Lance suggested quietly, "you could tell your parents the truth, about everything." I stared at him. "What?" "Think about it," he continued. "You've been their anonymous guardian angel for years. Maybe it's time they knew exactly who's been helping them, and why that help has to stop." My phone chimed with another email from my father. "Dear Observer, your words strike closer to home than you know. We did indeed make a terrible mistake years ago, one that haunts us daily. Our daughter, we lost her because we couldn't see beyond our own prejudices. If you know our story, you must understand our regret. Regards, Richard." I showed Lance the email. "See? They're starting to crack. A few more carefully worded messages and—" "Quinn," Lance interrupted, his voice stronger than it had been all day. "Stop hiding behind emails. If you want them to truly understand, you need to show them who you've become." "I can't," I whispered. "Not yet." "Then let me help you," a voice came from the doorway. Ricky stood there holding his phone. "The company just landed that government contract we were hoping for. Your bonus should more than cover Lance's treatment." Relief flooded through me, followed quickly by determination. I turned back to my laptop and began composing another email. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Smith, you speak of regret, but words are easy. Actions matter more. Here's a task. Find that daughter you lost. Not to ask for money or help, but to apologize. Show her that you've learned what truly matters in life. Until then, I'm afraid I must suspend my financial support. Consider it motivation to right past wrongs. Regards, someone who knows." "That's my girl," Lance murmured, squeezing my hand. As I hit send, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For years, I'd been trying to prove something to my parents through anonymous donations. Now, finally, I was choosing to put my love first, just like I did 15 years ago. "Ready to fight this thing?" I asked Lance. He nodded, managing a smile. "With you by my side, always." Outside the hospital window, storm clouds were gathering, but for the first time in weeks, I felt ready to weather whatever came next. 3 weeks into Lance's treatment, I was sorting through old files in my home office when my mother's latest email arrived. Her desperation was palpable through the screen. Dear Observer, we've been trying to locate our daughter, but all our leads have gone cold. Please, we need your help. The medical bills are overwhelming us, and we have nowhere else to turn. Margaret. I was about to delete it when something caught my eye. A small photo that had slipped from one of the folders. It showed a teenage me at my high school graduation, my parents beaming proudly on either side. Before I could stop myself, I scanned the photo and attached it to my reply. Perhaps this will help jog your memory. Look closely at what you lost. My phone rang almost immediately. It was Mia. Your mother just called me, she said without preamble. I sat up straight. What? How did she even get your number? She's been calling everyone from your old life. The photo you sent, Quinn, she's crying in my voicemail, actually crying. Good, I said, but my voice wavered. Is it? Mia challenged. Because you don't sound convinced. Before I could respond, Lance appeared in the doorway, looking stronger than he had in weeks. The new treatment was working, though we were far from out of the woods. Your father's at the gallery, he said quietly. My heart stopped. What? He bought one of my paintings, the one of you in the garden. Lance ran a hand through his hair. He didn't recognize you in it, but he said something about it reminding him of someone he lost. I slumped in my chair. He's never bought art in his life. He always called it a waste of money. People change, Quinn, Lance said, sitting on the edge of my desk. Maybe it's time to... My phone buzzed with another email, this time from my father. Dear Observer, that photo. I remember that day perfectly. Quinn was valedictorian. She gave a speech about following your dreams, and I sat there planning how to guide her toward a proper career. I was such a fool. Today I bought a painting. The subject reminded me so much of Quinn that I couldn't walk away. My wife called me crazy for spending money on art when we can barely afford our bills, but for once I didn't care about the cost. I just wanted to hold on to something beautiful. Richard. Wow, Lance whispered, reading over my shoulder. That doesn't sound like the same man who threw you out. It's manipulation, I insisted, but my voice lacked conviction. They're just trying to get the money back. Are they? Lance picked up the graduation photo. Because your father just spent his limited funds on art. Art, Quinn, the very thing he despised me for pursuing. My phone rang again. Ricky this time. Your father's in my office, he said without preamble. What? I nearly dropped the phone. He's asking about investment opportunities in tech startups. Says he's been following our company's success and wants to learn more. Ricky paused. Quinn, he's sitting 3 feet from your Forbes cover story, and he hasn't recognized you. I glanced at the framed magazine cover on my wall, my proud moment from last year. My hair was different now, more professional than the wild curls of my youth, but still. What should I do? Ricky asked. Nothing, I said firmly. Just treat him like any other potential investor. After hanging up, I turned to Lance. This is crazy. They're literally surrounding us without realizing it. Maybe that's the universe telling you something, he suggested. They're literally being drawn to everything that represents you. Art, technology, success. They just don't know it yet. My mother's next email arrived while we were talking. Dear Observer, the photo you sent broke my heart anew. I keep thinking about Quinn's smile that day, how proud we were, how certain we were about what was best for her. Now I sit in an empty house full of meaningless possessions, while my husband spends our savings on art and dreams about technology investments. Have we finally lost our minds? Or are we finally finding our hearts, Margaret? Lance wrapped his arms around me as tears started falling. You're not just teaching them about love and money anymore, he said softly. You're teaching them about beauty, passion, and dreams, all the things they tried to deny in you. I wiped my eyes and started typing. Dear Mrs. Smith, sometimes we find our hearts in the most unexpected places, in a painting that speaks to our soul, in a business that captures our imagination, or in the memories of those we've pushed away. Keep looking. the truth is closer than you think. Someone who cares. As I hit send, Lance's doctor called with his latest test results. For the first time in months, they were encouraging. Maybe, just maybe, everything was finally falling into place. "They're selling the house," Mia announced, bursting into my office without knocking. "Your parents just listed their mansion." I looked up from my laptop, where I'd been reviewing Lance's latest medical bills. "What?" She thrust her phone in my face, showing the real estate listing. The sprawling colonial where I'd grown up, with its manicured lawns and marble fountains, was now advertised as a motivated seller's opportunity. "Your mind games work too well," Mia continued, perching on my desk. "They're liquidating everything to try to find you." "That's not what I wanted," I whispered, staring at the familiar facade. My phone rang. Ricky again. "Your father's back," he said. "He's asking about entry-level positions. Says he wants to learn the tech industry from the ground up." "He what?" I nearly dropped my coffee. "Richard Smith asking about entry-level work? Says he needs to understand what his daughter saw in this world." Ricky paused. "Quinn, he's sitting in our lobby filling out an application, like a regular person." I pulled up our security cameras on my computer. There he was, my proud father, the former CEO, hunched over paperwork like any other job seeker. His designer suit was slightly worn at the edges, his hair grayer than I remembered. "What should I do?" Ricky asked. Before I could answer, Lance walked in, waving a newspaper. "Your mother's looking for work, too," he said. "She's applying at the art gallery where my paintings are displayed. Says she wants to learn about the art world." I sat back, stunned. "This isn't real. They're putting on a show." "A pretty expensive show," Mia pointed out. "They're selling everything they own." My email pinged with a new message from my mother. "Dear Observer, we're starting over. The house, the cars, the country club memberships, none of it matters anymore. We lost our daughter chasing status and wealth. Now we're trying to understand her world, hoping it might lead us back to her. My husband is learning about technology. I'm learning about art. We're terrified and excited and completely lost. But for the first time in years, we feel alive. Please, if you know where Quinn is, tell her we're trying, really trying. Margaret." Lance read the email over my shoulder. "They are trying," he said softly. "Question is, are you ready to let them?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to walk into that gallery while my mother's there, or have my father interview with me directly. But another part is scared," Mia finished. "That's normal, Quinn. They hurt you deeply." My phone buzzed with a text from the gallery owner. "Your mother just spent an hour staring at your portrait. She kept saying it reminded her of someone. When I mentioned the artist was Lance Gomez, she burst into tears." Lance squeezed my shoulder. "They're putting the pieces together, even if they don't realize it yet." I opened my email and began typing. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Smith, your actions speak louder than words ever could. But ask yourselves this. If you found your daughter today, would you accept her completely? Would you embrace her artist husband? Would you be proud of her tech company? Or would you still try to mold her into your ideal? Think carefully. Your answer matters more than you know." Someone who knows your daughter. Well. "That's cruel," Mia said, reading my screen. "No," Lance interjected. "It's necessary. They need to be sure about their changes before Quinn reveals herself." My office door opened again. Ricky, this time. "Your father just finished his application. He listed his current net worth as almost zero." He handed me the paper. He wrote something interesting in the "Why do you want this position" section. I read aloud. "I once told my daughter that dreams don't pay bills. I was wrong. I lost her because I couldn't see beyond my own prejudices. Now I want to understand the world she saw, a world where passion and purpose matter more than profit." Tears blurred my vision. Lance wrapped his arms around me while Mia and Ricky exchanged glances. "What now?" Mia asked softly. I wiped my eyes and straightened up. "Now we wait. Let them prove they mean it." I looked at the security feed where my father was now leaving the building. He looked smaller somehow, humbler. but there was something new in his posture. Hope, maybe. "And if they do prove it?" Lance asked. I touched the screen, tracing my father's image. "Then maybe it's time for a family reunion. But first," I turned to Ricky. "Give him the job. Entry level, no special treatment. Let's see if he really means what he says." "And your mother?" Mia asked. I smiled slightly. "Tell the gallery to hire her too. It's time my parents learned what it means to build something from nothing, just like I did." The universe had a strange sense of humor, but maybe that's exactly what karma was supposed to be. "Your father actually made coffee runs today," Ricky said, barely containing his laughter during our video call. The great Richard Smith, carrying drink trays and taking lunch orders. I adjusted my laptop screen, watching Lance paint in the background of our home studio. His strength was returning more each day, and with it, his creativity. "How's he handling it?" "Surprisingly well. He's eager to learn, asks smart questions, and hasn't complained once. Quinn, he's changed." My mother's daily report from the gallery arrived in my inbox. The owner had agreed to keep me updated on her progress. Day 15. Margaret is a natural with customers. Today she spent an hour discussing Lance's work with a buyer, speaking passionately about the emotion behind each piece. She still gets teary when she looks at your portrait, but now she smiles through the tears. "They're really doing it," Lance called from his easel. "They're actually changing." My phone buzzed. Mia was calling. "Turn on the local news," she said without greeting. "Right now." I pulled up the stream on my laptop. There were my parents standing in front of their half-empty mansion, being interviewed about their dramatic lifestyle change. "We lost sight of what truly matters," my father was saying, his voice thick with emotion. "We chose status over love, and it cost us everything that was really important." My mother stepped forward, clutching a familiar frame. "This is our daughter," she said, holding up my graduation photo. "If you're watching this, Quinn, we want you to know we're sorry. We're learning to see the world through your eyes. The art gallery where I work, the tech company where your father's starting over. We understand now what you saw back then." "Holy shit," Lance whispered, abandoning his painting to watch. The reporter turned to my father. "And you're really starting over at entry-level positions?" He nodded. "The best lessons come from the ground up. Our daughter knew that. We should have listened." I closed the laptop, my hands shaking. "They're using the media to find me." "No," Lance corrected, wiping paint from his hands. "They're publicly admitting they were wrong. That's different." My phone lit up with another email from them. "Dear Observer, you asked if we would accept our daughter completely today. The answer is yes, 1,000 times yes. We've learned more in these past weeks than in all our previous years. Every day at the gallery, I see the beauty in art that I once dismissed. Richard comes home excited about technology and innovation, the very things we used to call wasteful dreams. We sold the house today. The money will go to charity, specifically to foundations supporting young artists and tech entrepreneurs. It feels right somehow. Margaret." "Quinn," Lance said softly, "I think it's time." "I'm scared," I admitted. "What if this is all an act?" "Then you'll know you gave them a fair chance," he replied. "But what if it's real? What if they've actually learned?" Ricky's voice came through my still open video call. "Want to know what your father said in today's team meeting? Someone asked why he gave up everything to start over. He said, because success means nothing if you lose your soul in the process." Quinn, that man is not acting. My hands moved to the keyboard almost of their own accord. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Smith, your journey has been remarkable to witness. You've proven that change is possible, that love can indeed triumph over pride. Perhaps it's time we met in person. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., go to Lance Gomez's gallery opening. Stand before the painting titled Coming Home. Wait there. Someone you once knew." "Are you sure about this?" Lance asked, reading over my shoulder. "No," I admitted, "but I'm sure about them. For the first time in 15 years, I'm actually sure about them." My phone buzzed again. The gallery owner. "Margaret's crying. She keeps saying Coming Home is her favorite piece. Says it reminds her of her daughter's eyes." "It should," Lance smiled. "I painted it looking at you." Another email arrived from my father. Dear Observer, we'll be there. We don't deserve this chance, but we'll spend the rest of our lives trying to be worthy of it. Richard? I turned to Lance, my heart racing. Will you be there with me tomorrow? He pulled me into his arms, careful of his paint-stained hands. Try and stop me. I wouldn't miss this for the world. I should warn them, I whispered, about your health, about everything. Tomorrow, he said firmly. Let tomorrow be about healing old wounds. We'll face the new challenges together, as a family, if they're ready to be one. I nodded, watching the sun set through our studio windows. Tomorrow would change everything, again. But this time, I wasn't a scared 19-year-old choosing between love and money. I was a successful woman choosing to open her heart to the possibility of forgiveness. And somehow, that made all the difference. The gallery hummed with opening day excitement as I watched my parents through the security feed in the back office. They stood before Lance's painting, my mother's hand trembling as she reached out to almost touch the canvas. Ready? Lance squeezed my hand. I smoothed down my dress for the 100th time. They looked so different. My father's designer suits had been replaced by modest business casual wear. My mother's signature pearls were gone, her perfectly coiffed hair now simply styled. They looked smaller somehow, more human. Quinn, Mia appeared in the doorway. They've been staring at your portrait for 20 minutes. Your mother keeps wiping her eyes. I took a deep breath and stood. Okay, let's do this. Lance kissed my forehead. I'll be right behind you. The gallery fell silent as I walked through the main room. I could feel eyes following me, everyone aware of the impending drama. My heels clicked against the hardwood floor, each step echoing like a heartbeat. I stopped a few feet behind my parents. Beautiful piece, isn't it? I said softly. My mother turned first. Oh, yes, it's... Her voice died as recognition dawned. Her hand flew to her mouth. My father turned more slowly, as if afraid of what he might see. When our eyes met, he staggered backward, catching himself on the wall. Quinn? His voice cracked on my name. Hello, father. Mother. My voice remained steady, though my hands shook. Or should I call you Richard and Margaret? We are colleagues now, after all. You... My father's eyes darted around the gallery, taking in the paintings, the crowd, finally landing on Lance, who stood protectively nearby. You're the observer? The one who's been supporting you financially for years? I finished. Yes. The one you disowned for choosing love over money? Also yes. My mother stepped forward, then stopped herself. All this time, the gallery job, the tech company, you were watching us? Learning, I corrected. Learning if you could change, if you could see the world through different eyes. The painting, my father whispered, turning back to Lance's work. That's why it felt so familiar. It's your eyes. My husband has a gift for capturing souls on canvas, I said. The same gift you once dismissed as worthless. Lance moved to my side and my father flinched visibly. Lance, he said quietly, you've done well for yourself. These pieces are worth quite a bit now, I cut in. Ironic, isn't it? The penniless artist you were so afraid of turned out to be quite successful. Quinn, my mother stepped forward again, tears streaming freely now. We were wrong, so terribly wrong about everything. Yes, I agreed. You were, and it cost us 15 years. Can you... My father's voice broke. Can you ever forgive us? I looked at them both, really looked at them. The designer clothes and artificial polish were gone, replaced by something raw and real. My father's hands were slightly stained with toner from the office printer. My mother's fingers showed traces of the clay she'd been learning to work with at the gallery. That depends, I said carefully. The last few weeks you've been living in my world. Art, technology, building things from scratch. How does it feel? Alive, my father replied immediately. For the first time in decades, I feel alive. The gallery, my mother added. It's opened my eyes to so much beauty. And the people, they care about creation, about emotion, about more than money, I finished. They both nodded, looking ashamed. Then there's something else you should know. I took Lance's hand. Lance is sick. The treatments are experimental and expensive. That's why I had to stop sending you money. My mother gasped. Lance stepped forward. I'm fighting, he assured them. And Quinn's been my strength through all of it. My father straightened up, something of his old decisiveness returning. What do you need? We sold the house. We could... No, I interrupted. This isn't about money. This is about family. Real family. The kind that stands together through everything, not just when it's convenient or socially advantageous. Please, my mother whispered. Let us be that kind of family. Let us try. I looked at Lance, who nodded slightly, then at Mia, who gave me a thumbs up from across the room. Okay, I said finally. We can try. But we start fresh. No more pretense, no more expectations. Just real. My mother moved first, wrapping her arms around me. My father followed, his embrace tentative but genuine. And there, surrounded by Lance's art and our gathered friends, 15 years of pain began to melt away. Welcome home, I whispered, feeling their tears mingle with my own. The autumn breeze carried the scent of coffee and paint through Lance's studio windows as I watched my mother help him arrange his newest collection. She handled each canvas with reverence, occasionally stopping to study the details or ask questions about his technique. The light in this one is extraordinary, she said, adjusting a landscape. The way it catches the water. I painted that one during my first round of treatment, Lance explained. Quinn would read to me while I worked. My father entered carrying a tray of coffee, not sent by an assistant or ordered from a service, made by his own hands in our kitchen. The doctor called, he said, setting down the cups. The latest results are in. Lance squeezed my hand as we all held our breath. The experimental treatment had been a roller coaster of hope and setback. It's working, my father announced, his voice thick with emotion. The numbers are better than they've ever been. My mother dropped the pricing list she'd been reviewing. Oh, thank God! We're not out of the woods, Lance cautioned, ever practical. But it's the best news we've had. Then this calls for more than coffee, my father declared. He reached into his messenger bag, the same one he now carried to his entry-level tech job, and pulled out a bottle of champagne. Richard, my mother scolded, that's the bottle we were saving for Quinn's return, he finished. And now we're celebrating life, family, and second chances. I'd say that's worth it. As he popped the cork, Mia and Ricky burst through the door. We heard the news, Mia exclaimed, waving her phone. Lance, you beautiful survivor. Speaking of news, Ricky added, grinning at my father. The team loved your proposal for making art accessible through virtual reality. The board approved full funding this morning. My father blushed, actually blushed. It was Quinn's guidance that made it happen. She helped me understand how technology and art could work together. No, I corrected, accepting a champagne flute. You did that yourself. You learned to see the value in both worlds. The way we should have years ago, my mother added softly. She picked up one of Lance's smaller paintings, a simple study of hands intertwined. We were so blind. But now you see, Lance said, raising his glass, to clear vision. And to karma, I added with a slight smirk. Sometimes it teaches instead of punishes. My father cleared his throat. Speaking of teaching, Margaret and I have been talking. We'd like to start a foundation. What kind of foundation? Mia asked, though her knowing smile suggested she'd already heard about this. One that supports young artists and tech entrepreneurs who choose unconventional paths, my mother explained, using the money from selling our old life to help others build new ones. Like a certain young couple did 15 years ago? Ricky teased. Exactly, my father nodded. But we'll need help running it. Someone who understands both worlds, someone who proved that love and success aren't mutually exclusive. I looked at Lance, who nodded encouragingly. Are you asking me to help? We're asking you to lead it, my mother corrected. If you want to. Before I could respond, Lance suddenly grabbed his sketchbook. Nobody move, he commanded, his artist's eye lighting up. The light is perfect. We all froze, laughing as he began sketching frantically, my mother peering over his shoulder with genuine interest. my father discussing virtual reality with Ricky, Mia snapping candid photos, the champagne catching the late afternoon sun. "This is it," Lance announced after a few minutes of quick strokes. "This is the piece I've been trying to create for months." He turned the sketchbook around. In quick, confident lines, he'd captured all of us. Not posed or perfect, but real. A family built from broken pieces and second chances. "What will you call it?" my mother asked. Lance looked at me, his eyes twinkling. "How about Karma's Garden?" "Perfect," I said, raising my glass again. "To Karma's Garden, where love grows, pride falls, and second chances bloom." "To family," my father added. "To art," my mother chimed in. "To technology," Ricky couldn't resist. "To all of it," Lance concluded. "The whole beautiful mess." As the sun set over the city, casting long shadows through the studio windows, I watched my two worlds finally merge into one. The corporate father learning to appreciate beauty, the status-conscious mother discovering joy in creation, the husband who never gave up, the friends who stood by us. This was what Karma had really been teaching us all along, that life's masterpiece isn't painted in either success or love, but in the delicate balance of both. And sometimes the most beautiful gardens grow from the ashes of what we thought we wanted, blooming instead with everything we truly need.